Hi, this is Zoe Routh. Welcome back to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast. If you're a first-time listener, so happy to have you here. And if you're a return listener, thank you so much for listening into each episode that we produce each week. I'm thrilled to present this series on points of view. I've been learning heaps about different angles of seeing and being in the world, and I hope you have too. And today we have Lynne Cazaly. She is an international speaker, author, and master facilitator. She really is extraordinary about getting people to process different points of view and bring them together on a journey. And I've had the great fortune of training with her and studying her facilitation methodologies and being a colleague and a friend too. So apart from that, she's the author of 6 books, the last of which, Ish, The Problem with Our Pursuit of Perfection and the Life-Changing Practice of Good Enough, is what we're chatting about today. So we're going to take a deep dive into perfectionism and how we don't necessarily need to go there and what's a better alternative. Let's get into it. Oh, so excited to speak with you on this delightful morning about your latest book and your journey so far. So, Lynne, so great to have you. I want to know, really, you started off as a lecturer on communications, then you've become a global speaker and author of 6 amazing books. Tell me, how did you go from that? How do you go from lecturing into being a global globetrotter? Can you be a global globetrotter? I guess
yeah, sounds good to me. I'll take that. My background was in communications, so some of my earlier job roles were doing the comms for like hospitals and public health, government, education, training, health, arts. And it was from that experience that I then got into some lecturing. So universities love it when you've got some practical expertise to add to the curriculum. And I would try and make what can be boring lectures into something a little more interesting. And so I started honing my facilitation skills with students in large lecture theatres. It could be 100 students in there, and then in small tute groups with maybe 12 to 20 students. And I was always driven to not have them zoning out, to not have them disengaged. And so I just found that as a real challenge every day.
That's your scorecard, right? It's like, did they disengage or did they pay attention?
That's right. And so over time, I was using all these communication techniques that I knew, as well as delivering the curriculum, and had really enjoyed that. And then at some point you go, that's enough. I want to do something else. And so I started my own business around about that same time.
How did you get into the agile space? Because you've written at least one book on agile. It's called Agile-ish, isn't it?
Yes,
Agile-ish, and then ish came after that. So how did you go from being a uni lecturer into being agile guru?
Well, more about that learning and development. So I was working in a business where helping them with their learning and development. And I was working with one of the project managers, and he said, I'd love you to come and see what my team's doing. So I went and had a look, and it was in this separate room, kind of glass fishbowl. And I went in, I wrote about this in Ish, and there was, they had a bell on the desk, and they were dinging the bell every time that they'd released some software code into the company's website.
Oh, like Pavlov's dog.
Yeah, a bit like that. And a reward, like a shout the bar or ding, ding, we've done something. And it was from seeing a team deliver something rapidly. I just went, what the hell's going on there? And I want to know about it. And so that was probably 15 or so years ago where I first learned and was exposed to Agile, and then found that it really integrated well with my communications expertise and facilitation, and all of these pieces start to fit together.
Oh, I love it. I love that picture. The only picture I have in my mind right now is this glassed-in cubicle of these IT rats, and they've released something. They press the bell, ding, 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 and then the hot dog tray comes in. They get to eat hot dogs. I don't know why hot dogs comes up. I mean, IT and hot dogs. That's sort of my brain producing that connection, but that's sort of what's coming up. But I love it how it's the quick rapid fire iteration and the high engagement. And how do you actually get people interested in each other and the project?
Yes.
So those were that's a communication and facilitation and then agilely all coming together in one foray. What was your biggest insight as you went through these little iterations of your own career?
that we are often the thing that's holding us back, or we can be the thing that's holding a team back. We think we might be creating wonderful conditions and a great environment for people, but it's not until you see a really high performing team and what they do each day that you realise, oh, maybe I'm relying on some old ways of working instead of looking at some newer ways of working.
Oh, I love that. So there's two questions I have out of what you just said. First one is, how does the leader, which I'm guessing what you were inferring, how we hold people back, how do we or the leader get in the way of teams producing great results?
Something I learned in improvisation some years ago, which was about how we can either censor ourselves and not say what we would like to say, or the reverse, we too tightly control an environment because we want it to go a particular way. And so I think these two things are going on all the time, that we probably censor ourselves and don't say what we can or what we should, but at the same time we're holding on very tightly to a desired outcome or our mental picture of the way something should be. So I think this is what leaders are often struggling with, this perhaps inner dialogue, but also an outer control.
I think that's a really insightful observation. And I think it comes back to the grand narrative about what a leader is supposed to do, which is you're supposed to lead the way and have the direction and have the vision, which is horse pooey. Well, in contemporary leadership, it is anyway.
Yes.
Like, I think it's so, what a refreshing idea, a rewarding idea to have somebody say, yes, this is where we're going. And the certainty that's involved with somebody's standing up and saying, follow me, is what I think we would love to do. But the reality of today's global, connected, and volatile, fluid environment means that's impossible. No one has all the right answers.
No.
So when you talk about, like, you don't really know what you're missing out until you see a high-performing team, and you've seen a high-performing team, is it what you just described? It's the guys in the IT bubble ringing bells, or what else looks like a high-performing team?
There's a lot of things to be learned from the agile way of working, and you don't have to be an agile team to adopt some of these things. But I love seeing the way a smaller group can be working on something. So that the term or phrase that some software developers use is mob programming. So there's a bunch of people working on something rapidly. You imagine like ants or insects, furiously working on something, but only for a limited period of time. So there's this intense activity and everyone working on it, and then there's a release of that pressure, and everyone goes about their own thing again. So it kind of started with what's called pair programming, that is two software developers working together, one working on the screen or on the keyboard and the other acting like a coach and a collaborator, not a corrector, but someone who's working together in a pair. So this pair programming has really blossomed in some organisations to be mob programming, and that's amazing to see the energy that people bring to rapidly work on something, solve it, fix it, and then move away from that and go back to some other stuff. Highly energising.
Well, it sounds perfect for extroverts. I'm wondering about introverts who prefer to put their head down and mull through their own processes. How does it work for them in that context?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the technology field has been characterised by a lot of people who like to work alone or like to think alone. And that's the beauty of just having a burst of time where people come together, knowing it's not forever. We're not all going to work like this forever. It's too intense. So I like the idea of there's a constraint or a boundary, we work in that, and then one of the techniques I use in facilitation is applying some pressure and then releasing the pressure. And so it's the release of pressure that makes, I believe, introverts feel okay, that it's only for a short period of time. I can do that. And then I get to be alone or go back into my shell later.
I think that's a really wonderful technique, actually. Put on the pressure, release the pressure, as opposed to just put the pressure on.
Yeah, definitely. And this is some of that newer way of thinking, rather than the intense leadership or the intense control, but rather constraints that people can work in and be free in that.
Yeah, I like that. So, Ish, your latest book.
Yes.
Right? And you talk about being a reformed perfectionist. So what happened? You went from perfectionist to Ishmeister. What happened in there?
I think there'd been a bit of ish throughout my whole life. So my dad is quite ingenious, an engineer, and he's always looking for and finding cool solutions to things. So I think I grew up in quite an environment of ingenuity. And my mother's quite the performer, not on stage, but within the family. So I think I've grown up with this idea that you can perform and make shit up, and together it'll be okay. Then coupled with learning about agile and doing some work in improvisation and facilitating, these are all highly uncertain environments, which kind of replicate the workplace today. It replicates the world, highly uncertain. How do you thrive in that? And one of the ways is by experimenting and trying stuff out. So I'd accidentally ished the first time that I noticed it years ago, starting up my business and just whipping up some quick business cards, nothing flash, and realized, oh, wow, that'll do. They'll do the job. And they did do the job. And then as time went on, then I got something more serious, more beautifully designed. Funny, things have gone the other way now. Business cards seem to be less important or less required. But the thing is, we put in so much worry and effort and attention on things that really doesn't require that much attention. We can get away with going for near enough or good enough on a lot of things.
Now I can hear all my perfectionist clients freaking out over that. It's like near enough, close enough. That just sounds sloppy and irresponsible. So I'm guessing that's one of the resistance that people have to this kind of principle. It's like you're asking me to be sloppy instead of pedantic.
Yeah.
How do you respond to them? Because you had your own inner dialogue about this as well.
Well, we can't be pedantic on everything. And already, today people would have ished on things. They say, yeah, that'll do. That's near enough. That's good enough, on things like breakfast or what their hair looked like or the parking spot they chose or, the time they got into work. So we kind of do ish anyway. And it's our own standards we put on ourselves when we say, oh, no, I won't tolerate anything less than perfection. I'm like, well, excuse me, you already have. So be aware of the times that you have ished and have a look at where else you can, where it won't matter. So I say there's plenty of reasons and places where we still want precision, accuracy, 100% thoroughness. The thing here is knowing which ones deserve that attention and accuracy and completeness, and the ones we can let go.
Well, that's the $1 million question, right? So if somebody's a perfectionist, they apply that aspiration or standard to everything. How do they then choose what's good enough, near enough, and carry on? And which one's like, no, we need to get this right? How do you know? You have a formula in your book about this, right? So what are your general principles?
There's some things about looking at whether you need to go for higher standards. And I wouldn't say perfection because we can't achieve it. But think about the higher standard that you need on something. Is it about time, as in duration, or is it about the quality of something? I was working with a manufacturing team the other day and looking at lean principles in their on their shop floor, but also looking at how they can be more lean in their offices and in outside of the factory. And so we were looking for places where not where we could cut corners, but where we could reduce waste. And reduce waste isn't just recycling and reducing and reusing. It's also the waste of effort, the waste of our effort that we put into things, the longer hours we put in for not great return, the extra meetings we hold that may not be required. So I'm suggesting there's ish opportunities, not just on, perfection, trying to go for the highest standards on everything, but sometimes we can go for near enough on a range of things, like our presentation that we're working on or a blog that we're writing. I wouldn't want a surgeon to go for near enough or good enough. I want them to go for their highest level of precision, their standard. So a lot of this is about what is the standard. And this is the thing, we often do not know or define what the standard is. It lives up here in our mind. We've got this imagined expectation of the standard or the outcome we're going for. So I believe we need to articulate that, define it, and then we know when we'll reach it.
I think that's really helpful. And I was thinking about this in the context of diet and body image. You know, there's this pervasive thing in our culture, even though it's being challenged now about what is the highest level and criteria for that. You know, you can only eat lean and clean and green. And there's been a bit of a backlash around that, you know, the 80-20 rule, like 80% clean and green, 20% whatever.
Yeah.
Ish.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's taken sort of going to the extreme of X amount of body fat and X amount of diet things to people to rebel against that. And I guess, was that sort of your experience, not in the diet world, but in the work world? Like you go to the extremes and go, hang on a minute, this is a bit too intense and I'm frying myself. There's got to be a better way. Was that sort of the oscillation that you experienced?
Yeah, not only in my work world, but working with other people and seeing how much wasted effort they were putting in. Because as you rightly mentioned, the 80-20 principle, right? The Pareto effect. It's a principle that applies, and I reckon we forget about this. And so all we have to do is put in a measly 20% effort to get this incredible 80% return. But a lot of the time we're faffing about with 80% effort and only getting this measly 20% return. So to identify what are the high value tasks, this links back to agile ways of working, which is deliver value to the customer as soon as possible. Identify what are the highest value tasks that this team or this group or organisation needs to focus on. And this kind of happens with us, you know, the productivity movement says, you know, choose 3 big tasks for the day, or start with your biggest or most difficult or most important task. So this is the 80-20 principle. You only have to do a few things that will get an incredible return, rather than faffing about on all of these other things that really don't amount to much.
Yeah, asking why it's important is part of that criteria.
Exactly.
What are we really trying to achieve here?
Yes. And I think this is where that, you know, when you bring people together, say at the start of a project or kicking off something, it's really useful to work out, well, what are we focusing on? What is the priority? Where are we putting our attention? Otherwise, there's great uncertainty and people continue to work really hard towards deadlines, not quality or defined standards. You know, if someone says, oh, when's the presentation due? Oh, next Tuesday. So people work diligently between now and next Tuesday, sometimes taking up all the hours they can in that time. But maybe they've already achieved what's required for that presentation after 3 or 4 hours work. And instead they've done 48 hours work, a lot of which may be totally unnecessary.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm excited about the liberation of all that wasted time.
Yes, it is. This is what people are saying. They're reading Ish and then they're sending me messages going, oh, this incredible weight's off my shoulder, of this weight of expectation and unwritten standards and the expectations we have of ourselves, the expectations we think society has of us, the expectations we put on others. These weigh people down and drive us to do more, when more ain't better. So the idea of going for perfection, most of us have got a little bit of a perfectionist trait in us. So it's not just some people and not others. Most of us have around certain things. I like to talk about the stacking the dishwasher. You know, people will say there's a certain way it has to be done, and that standard or expectation they have. But if we can define what it is, the standard that we're going for, then as soon as we reach that, it doesn't matter how long that takes. You know, it might only take half an hour or 15 minutes or 3 days. But unless we know what it is we're going for, we can fall into this dangerous trap of thinking it's not good enough yet. And we actually don't know what good enough is.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So I noticed myself just yesterday actually having an ish moment.
Yeah.
an ish insight moment where I was editing a page on my website. And I realized it had taken me ages to get this page up in the first place.
Right.
And I thought I had to get it perfect.
Perfect.
Before I published it. And then, a month later, I'm going back and adding stuff in anyway. But whatever perfect was at the time was never going to be the end product. And it's like, oh, what if I hadn't stressed so much and put up what I had without the stress? And then as I kept working on the content and the purpose of this particular program and let it feed back into that page with the overall objective of being of service to the people I'm working for, then wouldn't that have been better than delaying the start of a project because, did I get it? Did I nail the ish thing?
That's it. So what you're talking about there is incremental work, which is let's work in small packages of work. That is, let's identify the stuff that's valuable and get that done, and then work in iterations. So whatever we've already done, let's improve on that over time. And this happens with our devices. They're constantly being automatically updated with the latest version of an application software. So we're quite used to now living in a world of increments and iterations. A lot of startups will put out their minimum viable product, the thing that's just got the basic features on to see if it's got legs. And we can work like this every day of our lives in every project. Is just start working on the things that have the highest value. It's way more efficient, reduces stress, makes people feel better about the progress they're making, and it helps people get stuff done. That's why those software developers were dinging the bell so often, is they'd worked out their what's called a backlog. They'd worked out their list of things that were the high value tasks that they were working on, and then as they're ticking each one off, ding, and it totally inspire the team. And like, yeah, we're getting this stuff, the important stuff done. Tick, ding, next. That's what a high performing team looks like. They're getting things done, the valuable stuff done.
And it starts with defining what is the valuable stuff, as opposed to a long laundry list of to-dos, which aren't filtered.
That's right. And then you can ish the rest. Relax,
And I love how you ished your book ish as well. Like you talk about that in your book, that this, I think I don't know what version I have of the book. Do you know what version, or has there been another version since you had these printed out?
The main publicly available version is iteration number 5. So the first one was pretty crappy looking. It still had a similar cover on the front, but it was just a bit messy and disorganized. And then there was iteration 2, and then iteration 3 I really put out there a lot wider. A lot of people bought that book, and I remember getting a review on Goodreads, and this woman said, "Oh my God, this book is just like a train of stream of consciousness. It's quite disorganized." And what else? She said, "I hope it's still to be edited." And I replied like, totally, I've put it out there. It's imperfect. And I can't sit here and profess to battle perfectionism with increments and iterations and then not do it myself.
Did part of you just feel a bit wounded with that criticism? I just have to know.
Part of me did, but I also would say I know. The important thing is I know what's going on. I know what I was doing. I know what the iteration was. So I did respond to her comment and say, yeah, you're right. It was an early draft, got lots of feedback. Now we're up to iteration 5. Have you checked that out? Let me know your address and I'll send you one.
Do you think people feel ripped off? I don't know. This is what's going on in my brain.
Yeah.
If I bought a draft and it was never going to be like, is that wasted money? Like, do I feel like I have, as a reader, would I feel peeved at that? Or do you feel a sense of responsibility to the people who purchase your book to have it in better format? Like, how do you talk about that in your own mind?
Well, they all got, perhaps unexpectedly, they received a copy of the newest finished final edition. So everybody who'd bought it, one day they would have got home and opened a package and there was the latest book saying, thanks for your support and here's the iteration 5.
That's awesome.
And a couple of people said, I read the second one that you've sent me and I'd read the earlier edition and wow, the next one's even better. I'm like, yeah, that's what iteration is about, And if I was a perfectionist, I would still be working on that first edition and not putting it out there.
Yeah.
lots of us have got ideas for books, and books are just one metaphor of projects and putting things out there. But we've got lots of ideas that never see the light of day because we're still working on them, and it's our own battle around the self-worth that we have, that what we've done is not yet good enough. But it is. It is way good enough.
Well, yeah, that's what it sounds like to me. Even though you got that criticism from edition number 3 from the lady who said stream of consciousness, blah.
One person,
Well, she still read it and got value out of it. She just didn't like its format.
Yeah. And I can focus on that, or on the hundreds of people who've been in touch and said reading this book has, released amazing pressure, or I read it in one sitting, or I read it over the weekend and now I've given it to, gifted it on to someone. So I think these are the things you hope, that you'll create something that actually lands with people. So that makes me feel way better than what one person thought about iteration number 3.
Yeah. And it's also, this whole notion of ish has helped liberate me from the drama of typos.
Oh, yeah. Yes. True.
Because I know typos can really irritate a lot of readers.
Yeah.
And I've published 3 books as well, and each one there's freaking typos in them.
Oh, of course there are. That's just the way. Just the way it is. So you can put out another iteration and fix those typos if you want.
Yeah, well, the typos, will definitely want to fix them. But I think what's more important, and what I've come to in terms of ishing my way through this, is realizing once you have a book out in the world, or whatever piece of work out in the world, is that it's a starting point, and it will serve people for where they are then, because it's me who I was then. And then I can come back to that and offer more value. So I'm looking at my 3 books and looking forward to the next iteration of each of them, because I can add even more richness and depth. But in doing that, it doesn't sort of discount the first edition either.
No, not at all. And not at all. There's the Agile-ish book. So I got quite a few printed, and there's a shocking, glaring error in there. There's I lead into a quotation and I say, such and such said, blah, 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 blah. And then the quote stops. There's a big gap of white space on the page. Don't know what happened. Got deleted somehow. And of all the people who've bought that and been gifted that book, do you know how many people alerted me to that problem? None. None. So people have skimmed over it, or not read that bit, or they've got the book intending to read it. And this reveals what's known as the spotlight effect, is that we are way more worried about things than other people are. We think the spotlight is on us all the time, and it's just not.
It's
hilarious. Just not.
And where that kind of mistake can actually be a wonderful thing. I'm going to have to go dig it out of Facebook. I saw it by a post by Valerie Koo, said, I thought it was an urban myth, but then I saw it in an actual bookstore. I don't remember the name of the book, but it was by a famous international author. And there's a typo on the cover. And
yeah, good one.
And it's like the subtitle has got the in it. So something the.
Love it.
I know. And rather than being more like, now that if you can find that edition, that is like a finders keepers collector's item, because it's such a marvel thing. So I don't think you can do those things deliberately. They're kind of like Easter eggs in films, right? Like finding that little, or the coffee cup that had happened in Game of Thrones. Did you hear about that?
Oh, yeah. So these become cult, it is the imperfection. So this is why perfectionists, it's like, it's okay, because it's actually the imperfection that people warm to. And I think that TV show called Nailed It, #NailedIt, where people, cook and bake. And the entertainment is in us seeing, not belittling people, but us in seeing and recognising and identifying with the human side of other people. And it's that's called the pratfall effect, right? That if we show a little bit of our humanity, a little bit of our imperfection, people actually perceive us more highly. So the pratfall effect, like a pratfall falling on your behind, that if we have a little slip up, like a typo, or we stumble with something, that enables us to be more highly, revered or respected by people, rather than us trying to control and make everything perfect, that we can relax. Spotlight effect, people aren't paying as much attention as we think. And the pratfall effect, we can let imperfections out there because people perceive us better when we do. This thing works in reverse, right? We think we have to show ourselves perfectly. We don't. We don't at all. It's working against us. We need to let some more of our humanity, more of our imperfections out there.
I think that's the Japanese principle of wabi-sabi when it talks about artisan craftsmanship, is that if something is produced and then gets a little chip in it, it's lovingly repaired with gold or whatever. And this sort of element of wabi-sabi, it's lived an item and it's unique and it's lived a little, makes it far more valuable than, as you said, the perfectly etched whatever
That's
thing.
right. And so I refer to wabi-sabi and kintsugi, or gilded joinery in Ish, about how that imperfection is held up and it's more greatly revered because of what it is. And humans are like this, right? We've all got scars and wounds and things that make us who we are. We don't have to show them all, but we become better, more higher valued, prized things and people with those imperfections, rather than, trying to avoid them.
I think there's got to be a balance, though, because I'm just imagining if you have stuff up after stuff up, and you can tip over the point where it's from charming to being seen as incompetent. And I think that's where people might get worried that any slip up then shows incompetence. So how do you measure that? Like, how do you know that you've moved past the threshold of being perceived as incompetent to competent and charming?
Well, that pratfall effect, the downside of that is if people already think you're a bit of a fool, when you mess things up, it just confirms. They go, yeah, they are a fool. But if you're generally trying to do your best, not perfect, but if you're trying to do, the best you can in the time you've got available and the standard you're going for, people want you to do well. People will perceive you well. And then when you mess up a little bit, they go, oh, they're human. Wow, I like them more. So for most of us, it works in this way. For people like, I don't know, Donald Trump or political leaders that we don't think much about, so our perception of them is lower, when they do mess up, we just think less and less and less and less of them.
It's a bit of a confirmation bias.
Yeah. So the pratfall effect works when we have a kind of neutral feeling about someone and then they make an error or show an imperfection, we like them better.
I'm wondering if in our work, to help increase the likelihood that it's going to be the pratfall effect instead of a negative aspect, is if we state our intention up front to be of service and that we're doing our best in service. Or do you think that's just sort of, I think that's a negative approach, or what do you think?
Do you mean like letting people know what it was we're going for, what it is we're going for before we start on something, or?
Yeah, well, I'm trying to get to, like, how do we position ourselves to avoid being to the confirmation bias that we're incompetent and setting ourselves up for success. So, like, people generally, let's say speaking in front of an audience, people generally want the speaker to do well.
They sure do.
So how do you signal, whether it's a speaking engagement or any kind of piece of work that you're doing, that I'm giving it a red hot go? How do you signal that? Do you state it up front, or
no? I don't think so. You get on and you do it. And I think we see this daily when speakers get up and the first thing they say is an apology. So they say, "Oh, sorry, this isn't as well prepared as I want it to be."
Okay, that's not good.
Not good, right? At any time people apologise at the start of a presentation, well, the pratfall effect has now worked in reverse. They were neutral and now they've kind of lowered their own value. So shut up. Even if when people say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I've got a bit of a cold today," or "I'm not feeling very well," and I think, no, zip it. Don't say it. Just get on and do your thing. No one needs to know. I remember having to do a presentation. I had a shocking toothache and I started and kept going. And I'm thinking, I've got to say something. And I didn't. I just say, no, just keep going. Just keep going. And then afterwards, they said, "Oh, are you staying for lunch?" I said, "No, I'm going to the dentist." So people kind of don't need to know that. Don't need to know there's some of our inner fears, our inner workings.
Yeah,
and it's another sign of perfectionism. So
to make excuses for why it's not perfect before you even start.
So therefore, I'm kind of dismissing my own value before you've even had a chance to take me at face value.
It's also when you see speakers get up saying, oh, I'm really nervous. It's like, oh.
Zip it. Don't say it. That's right. So
People will tell anyway, so you don't need to flag it. And actually, I think this is how it works with the nervousness thing. If people see a speaker who's nervous, they feel compassion, empathy for them.
Yay! This is
and
it.
want to rally behind them.
That's pratfall effect. Totally working there.
Yeah. As soon as they say, I'm nervous, it's like, ugh.
That's right. That's right. So we've experienced that now as an audience member, and we've probably also experienced it as the speaker. People don't need to hear your inner dialogue. They want to hear the message that you've come to share. And I've seen this recently with a few people who are blogging, and sometimes I feel like they're giving too much information, and so it starts to, can make you think, oh, this person doesn't have the competence to do whatever service is that I want them to do.
What do you mean they're giving too much information about themselves?
Too much, too much of the inner dialogue.
Oh, really?
Particularly in a business situation, if you're publishing information about your ideas, it's fine to have errors or imperfections, but I think sometimes going too far into the inner dialogue, go, how valuable is that to the reader? And to me, that's something that's the battle we're having with our own perfectionism or imperfectionism, and it comes out here, and it actually doesn't need to.
So I'm balancing this up with what Brene Brown advocates in terms of vulnerability and stuff. So where do you sit in relation to her principles of sharing your feelings as an act of strength?
Sure. But there's also that belief about, not sort of letting that like bleed out over everybody as, day after day, meeting after meeting. Vulnerability is one thing, but an incredible cloud of doom, not really helpful. Come back to, we've still got to be, still have to be a leader.
Yeah, I call that a water bomber. Somebody who shows up with their emotions unleashed.
That's it.
And they just go over everybody.
That's all. All. I totally adore Brene's work and have quoted her several times in my books. So, and seen her, I think she's awesome. So I'm not countering her views. What I'm talking more about is the inner dialogue connected to perfectionism.
Yeah.
And how we sometimes put it all out there, and it's not in an
Thanks
effort.
For the sound effects.
It's an absolute demonstration of perfectionism coming out your mouth. It didn't need to come out.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot more sense now. Clarifying that sort of that inner narrative about needing to be perfect and making apology for it. So this big shift for you from perfectionism to Ishmeister. Yeah. Can you even be a Meister of Ish?
I don't know, probably.
Ish practitioner, maybe, than a Meister, because that implies perfectionism in the Ishism.
That's right.
Have you ever had any other major changes of perspective where you've spun on your view of yourself or the world? And if so, what happened?
I've had a couple of years of illness, so in the last few years, so that's definitely been a spinner for me, is to go, wow, I was worrying a whole lot about stuff that is so doesn't matter. And so I think I've come back and come through that with a perspective of not, oh, you get another chance, but what is that really what you want to do? is that really worth your time and effort? I was talking to someone recently. They said their daughter spends 18 hours a week doing their eyebrows.
What?
So eyebrows are a real thing, right?
18 hours?
18 hours a week on her eyebrows. I said
What do you even do for 18 hours with your eyebrows?
You could run a startup, a side hustle in 18 hours. You could be learning a whole new thing. You could be doing incredible stuff in that time. And so for me, I go, does that matter? Do I want to be known as, oh my God, Lynne was here with us for many years, but now, today we're farewelling her, and what do you say? Wow, she didn't do much, but gee, she had great eyebrows. Like, what do you want to be known for? what do you want to, what legacy do you want to leave? And
This is going to bother me now all day. Like eyebrows, 18 hours a week on freaking
yeah,
eyebrows.
yeah. So that's about, yeah. So she's spending about 2 hours a day on them. So that's in the morning, like plucking, shaping, feathering, painting, combing, and not just once during the day, but then, attending to them again later in the day and again later in the day. So this parent said, I just would like you to tally how much time you're spending on this. That's perfectionism around the way we look.
Oh my Lord.
So yeah, my pivot around is that stuff matters so much less than we believe it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had also, I mean, I went through cancer in 2005, and that was a pivot point for me as well. It does sort of make you shift your priorities.
Yes.
I think the trick to capitalizing on such life events, making use of them, is to remember them. And I think, I don't know if you've had this experience too, since you've had an illness and a shift in perspective. I can fall back into old patterns too. And so I think the whole point of having a book like Ish out is to stand by a principle and to remind yourself daily that this is what you're operating against, as opposed to by default or by that sort of inner narrative that can take over, that you need to spend hours looking after eyebrows or whatever thing is going on for you.
Vacuuming, I've got a neighbour down the road. I'm just forever hearing her vacuum going. I know she's forever vacuuming. Come over to my place. It's like, that'll do, right? Totally ish that stuff. Totally ish it.
I'd say outsource that thing. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, I think that's a really good takeaway for the listeners, is to evaluate what it is you're actually doing and spending your time on. But I think for me also, it's where you're spending your inner thinking energy on. Because I find
true.
I've been paying attention more of that lately and going, how much time am I wasting thinking about breakfast and dinner? And what's the right ratio of carbs to fat to protein? And I'm like, oh my God, there's a whole cluster of thinking that goes in, wasted brain space in that.
Yeah.
So I think we can waste time doing, we can waste time and energy thinking as well.
Yeah, there's that internal load of I'm working on it, or, I was mentoring a small group recently, and they said, we're deciding. And I went, your decision's usually a thing. You must still be either thinking about it or researching or gathering information. Why are you still mulling over whatever this decision is that needs to be made? Oh, we're still deciding what it is. I said, well, how about let's make a decision and then see how we go with that. So that was taking up an incredible amount of time for that small team, gathering, weighing up alternatives, doing pros and cons lists. This is a behaviour known as maximising, and it's totally aligned with perfectionist behaviour. So a friend of mine was recently wanting to get a new microwave, and so they 6 months. Oh, sorry, it wasn't a microwave. It was a dishwasher. A family of 4, and they'd spent 6 months hand washing dishes because she hadn't had time to sit down and work out which was the best dishwasher to get. And that is a total example of what's called this maximising behaviour. So she was procrastinating, again, a perfectionist behaviour. So procrastinating on the information, procrastinating on the decision, hadn't got enough information yet. And what happened was her partner said, no, we're going to the shop right now. And they drove down to the shop and they made a decision in 15 minutes. And then they had the dishwasher installed the following couple of days. So all that time, all those 6 months where that was this load in their mind of the dishwasher, we've got to sit down and make that decision. No, you can actually make it a lot quicker than you think.
I think if you weigh up the consequences of the decision, that should determine how much energy you put into analyzing it. Consequences of dishwasher purchase, relatively low on the consequence scale. I'm guessing the bigger picture of things.
Yeah, but it's an example. Most of us would have an example of the dishwasher story in our life where we're taking forever to make a decision, we're gathering more information, and that's this maximising behaviour, whereas we need to go for what's called satisficing. Herbert Simon, an economist, talks about satisficing. That is, you find something that is satisfactory and will suffice. You can hear it in the word satisfice.
I'm trying
And
to write it.
that's
Satisficing.
facing, and that's what ish is all about.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So last minute or ending summary point of suggestion for the listeners. What have you got?
What have I got? I would say if you're feeling overwhelmed and you think you've got lots of things on, that the idea of being able to do more is overwhelming, then you might have a perfectionism behavior going on somewhere. Just stop for a moment, scan across the things that you're working on, and really think, are any of those, do I think they're not good enough yet? And that's a sign.
A sign that you're suffering from perfectionism.
Yeah, it is a suffer. We are suffering. Yeah.
I agree. I think talking with you has made me feel so much better about the day.
Oh, good. It's making me feel better about the day too. Good to hear.
Thanks so much, Lynne. You've been awesome.
Thank you, Zoe. Thanks.